Bruce, we've talked already a little bit about decarbonisation, and we've talked deglobalisation. Again, feel free to chime in on any of these, but digitisation, everybody, you can't have a conversation. We've managed to go 46 minutes so far without anyone mentioning AI, but we're going to have to do that, obviously, because this is does seem to be such a transformative technology, and so rapidly transforming every aspect of our lives. And I'm wondering about, from your perspective, from an investing perspective, we talked again a little bit about the way we've seen some of these, company like NVIDIA is the obvious example that, has caught the AI wave. What are the other kind of things we should be looking out for as this becomes more embedded?
So I would just say this phone, 20 years ago, nobody had one. Today, you get everything on it. And it's because this goes from here to a fiber line, it goes out, goes up to a tower, goes across town, goes down to some data center into a cloud. And that build out is dramatic. So the opportunities on that whole spectrum are enormous. And they've been building, like we've been building data centers and towers and fiber for 10 years. It has been increasing and doubling every year for 10 years. And AI has taken it almost like this in the last 6 months. And there's two things. One, it's all the infrastructure that I just mentioned, but it's all powered by green power. These AI and cloud companies all want renewables. They need it to be green. And so the amount of build out that's happening on that is very, very significant. We just signed a deal with Microsoft to $15 billion of renewable power. We'll build them out over the next 6 years. And that's only getting started. You raised that very timely. There's a question from the floor, from the audience, to exactly that point. How do we square blockchain and AI with decarbonisation, given the immense energy requirements for these? There is just, by the way, it's just, there are some paradoxes, aren't there here? I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but paradoxes or contradictions. That isn't one example. Another one is, the dramatic growth. Well, it's not quite as dramatic as we thought, but what is still expected to be significant growth in electric vehicles, which is obviously creating huge demand, additional demand for electricity. I wonder, are you reasonably confident that these apparent contradictions are being resolved, whether it's by things that you just talked about, a massive Microsoft sort of renewables So I'm not going to
investment?
talk to blockchain. I think I have an expert beside me, so I won't talk to that. But what I will talk about is just the amount of energy that's getting built and the amount that's needed. And so we're electrifying over the next 25 years, we're going to electrify most industries. And the very interesting, or the most important thing is, in most countries of the world, the lowest cost bulk electricity is solar or wind today. But what we need is batteries.
Storage, yeah.
And we need less power consumed by many things. And the technology geniuses of the world who created all these things need to put their minds to their chips consuming less power. And so it's going to be some of everything. We need to build more renewables. We need to have better batteries. They need to use less power with their chips. So we need to consume less. We need to build more. But it's inevitable. The electrification, just for perspective, the last 20 years, flat electricity in the United States. To make it very simple, in the next 20 years, it's going to double. That's an enormous amount of capacity that has to get built. And look, when great minds get put to things, things happen. And the fact is, it is the lowest cost bulk electricity in most places. People just have to get at it.
Charlie, everybody's got their own list of Any of these Ds in particular, you want to particularly address decarbonisation, the digitisation again? Any of your thoughts on digitisation?
Well, when you think about what digitization, AI, any of these things, I think, just to personalize it for a second, I think if you're running a business of almost any size, you have to look at it and say, this is one of the most exciting times to be running something, because it's not business as usual. If you don't think differently about what you're doing and how you're doing it, you're going to be left behind either by someone who's doing that as an incumbent or someone who's starting. So I think, the reality is, it's just what we're seeing is, it's not reversible. It needs to be controlled. Things need to be done properly, but it's going to change the nature of almost anything that's done. And when you then say, well, what are the knock-on impacts of that? I think this is where, Bruce's point is right, where you look at it as, it's not just AI. In order for AI to be what it is, you need to have the data centers, you need to have the cloud infrastructure, you need to have the electricity to drive that. In order to satisfy those electricity requirements, you need more sources than you have today. That creates a host of opportunities. And so I think when you just look at, what this all means, it's just acknowledge it's one of the most exciting times, but you need to think differently about where those opportunities are and how your own business is going to profit from them.
A couple of other specific questions from the audience before we wrap up with some closing remarks. Back to commercial real estate, and again, maybe Bruce is for you or Charlie for you. How does commercial real estate get affected by the migration of capital and companies to Florida, Texas, and other states, I guess particularly from California and the north and elsewhere? And it says, aren't these assets permanently impaired? With interest rate reduction may not be helping that much. I mean, is that kind of big demographic change? I mean, that surely is leaving, significant sort of pools of real estate, both residential and commercial, in certain areas that are...
Well, I think the answer is, yes for some and no for others. I mean, the fact that, there are buildings that need to be torn down, that need to be repurposed, which is not the easiest thing to do because of permitting and whatnot, but that is the reality of what's going to happen. And because what they were built for is not the purpose they're going to have. But there are plenty of other purposes that exist for that physical site, and so that creates opportunities. And so I think, there is this, whether it's migration of people, whether it is the types of people that wind up in some parts of the country versus others, the world's not stagnant. And unfortunately, when you build a building, it's not the easiest thing to convert from one thing to another, but that's what's going to have to happen.
Well, I think
Yeah, sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the governor of New York, who I was talking to yesterday, was commenting on they're trying to create an incentive program. I think she passed some legislation to incent commercial real estate owners to convert office into residential, that they're underbuilt on the residential side. But even then, I think most real estate people probably say it's not quite enough yet. But I think that there's going to need to be some efforts to do that.
Bruce?
Yeah, two little observations. One, Miami and Austin are often quoted as the places where everyone wants to go. And yes, some went there and some are going there. But if you're a major corporation and you need technology or financial people, they're in New York or San Francisco. They're not in Austin or Miami. Like, there are small amounts. And if you run a small hedge fund, yeah, you can be in Miami. But if you need 10,000 people, you're in New York. And so that's not changing. It's not changing for a long period of time, meaning you will have to build, you can't do it in Miami, but you will have to build a whole city. And they just don't exist. So that's the first point. And second, look, I just say, yes, there are some, forever, like Lower Manhattan was Wall Street, and Wall Street became a residential district. Yeah. All you need to do is hit land value, and then the entrepreneurs came in and made a lot of money building residential. So it's not that, but at the top end, these buildings are full and rents are very high. It's that tail. Yeah. It just always has to get converted, and either somebody has to write it down to that point or somebody has to give incentives to get there. And New York's the one place where it does happen because land values are very high. It's an island, it's very constrained, and therefore stuff converts very quickly. Many other places it doesn't. And that's where a lot of issues are.
A final question, I'd just like you all to weigh in on this. We've obviously, we've touched on this in the course of the conversation, but I want to situate this, all of what we've been talking about in a kind of global context. And it has been one of the most striking phenomena of the last 5 years or so, certainly post-pandemic, maybe arguably a little bit before that the US has been, the sort of standout performer in many respects. And I know we can, and André, you may want to quibble with that, especially in terms of some emerging markets. But if you look at the broad economic, financial performance, Europe has been pretty stagnant. China, of course, has been the big story of the last 5 years. The challenges that's faced, everybody's gone from thinking China was going to be the dominant economy in the world to thinking, well, maybe it isn't anymore. Emerging markets have had their different challenges. The United States, and again, you look forward-looking, whether it's in terms of market expectations or whether it's economic forecasts, it does look like the U.S., continues to be, perhaps, defying some of the odds, the kind of, again, the driver, the world's sort of predominant economic driver. And I just wondered again, why all of you can just weigh in just to conclude this. A, whether I'm right, or I'm missing something, and B, are you all confident that this is going to continue? And I'll start, André, with you.
Yes, I am, as long as you don't mess up. But it's the harvest of a combination of a lot of things in the U.S. It's a free market, functional democracy, best education in the world, best university in the world, innovation, and very functional and deep capital markets.
All right, we're about,
if you put
we're
all of
about
that
2 for
together,
5 on those at the moment, aren't we?
If you put all of that together, you have outperformance. Right? So I'm long-term bullish with U.S. Of course, you have different cycles, different political leaders, and you can always mess up with that. Right? If you look at China, and this amazing cycle of China was related to big infrastructure investments with tremendous productivity gain, migration of population coming from rural to urban areas, amazing labor force arbitrage in terms of costs, and all of that in a wild capitalism sponsored by the state. So it's a very specific combination, but it changed, right? The new marginal infrastructure investment doesn't bring the same productivity. The labor cost arbitrage is not there anymore in a small fashion, and even the Chinese capitalism changed. It's not exactly the same. So the consequence of that is some loss of momentum. So that's my comparison with
I just say making money and good economic circumstances are not always the same. It's good to be in countries that have good rule of law and cultural respect capital and all those things, but markets can get overbought and oversold, and the trick to making money is being in the countries, having people there, and I call it arbitraging the opportunities. Don't go when markets are up and invest when they're down or on the outs. And if you're in good countries, they come and go. As André said, they go up and down. That's Brazil more than any. But that's how you can make a lot of money in these countries.
Jenny?
Well, I think, André, you said it exactly right. I'd list all those things. The tremendous amount of innovation has come out of the U.S., and there's reasons for that. I think the concern is the U.S., we need to be a culture that continues to celebrate success and not beat down success, and we need to be a country that celebrates freedom of speech. And you see a lot of things going on right now on college campuses that is a concern. But somehow the U.S., no matter what happens, seems to lead on innovation. And to your point on China, places like China where the government can be very specific in guiding. Like you talk to people, they'll say BYD is better than Tesla, right? They have focused on electric vehicles, and they're doing a pretty dang good job there. Carbon investments on renewable. China has twice the investment of the U.S. So it can be very prescriptive and get outcomes. The U.S. is just continues to be, I think, the most innovative.
Charlie, last word.
Really quickly, I think the fact that we've done so well is shouldn't be a surprise when you look at all the pluses that the country has going for it. Whether it's innovation, whether it's the education, whether it's the financial system, our markets, the strength of banks, and so those have all come together, and you see the benefits of that. And I think when you look at how companies are prepared for the future. We all talk about the risks. We all use words that can get people nervous. But the fact is, if you go ask people, what are you actually doing in your business? What environment are you actually running the place for? It all pretty much presumes that the success will continue. There'll be volatility. There'll be ups and downs, and that is because we feel so good about what this country is all about.
Well, it is pretty much as though I think the US has managed to create a pretty damn good model, damn good system, and lots of people in the country are trying to find ways to destroy it. So on that note, thank you very much indeed to all of you for coming, and thanks very much to our panel.
Okay.
I can't believe she's going. I said, please show me.